Hi there, how is it going? Welcome back to el podcast del Salón de Idiomas. Hi, Rox.
Hi, how are you doing?
Well, I'm really excited because we are going to keep delving into more interesting things when it comes to English learning, aren't we?
Yes, for sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, last episode, we were a little bit focused on grammar and all these kind of like nuances that people tend to miss. And in this case, we're going to delve into this a little bit better to make it more seamless when it comes to, let's say, install English in your brain, okay?
Yeah, cool. So we've been talking about this for some time now, and we've decided that it would be great to make this episode based on how to internalize and how to make English more automatic in our brains. So hopefully this episode would help you, give you some insight on how to train that and make it flow.
Yeah. So now, just to break the ice a little, Rox, have you had difficulties when you were learning Spanish? Was it like a little bit challenging for you to internalize these words?
I think it was not that challenging, mostly because I had already been exposed to plenty of movies and soap operas before
Yeah, you are. Good.
coming to Spain. So I would already be acquainted to the sounds, the pronunciation, certain words. So that made it easier for me. And then I do have to admit I'm a bookworm. So the books we were assigned at school, I don't know, I will just, because it took me a bit of a time to get used to the new way people were like, I kind of found my space. I found my space within the books, so I read a lot. So eventually the language learning turned out to be more natural because I had already been exposed to plenty of reading.
Oh, there you are. Fantastic. Well, then you're not the best example. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, these are like the basic concepts that you see that they actually work. You know, when we keep saying that you have to read, you have to watch movies, it seems like a scratched record, but actually it works.
Yeah, well, let's not underestimate the general public. I guess that most of them are interested in reading, right, guys? Do you like reading? Do you like reading in a different language? I'm sure you do like. Yeah, you do like.
Of course. Okay, so now I think that today we're going to focus on really contrasting ideas that actually complement each other pretty well. Even though that might sound a little bit contradicting, it actually works, because you were mentioning how working with translations works really well when we want to make English more natural for you. So can you please enlighten all of us?
Yeah, cool. So you made a really good point. Indeed, apparently, and okay, on no account are we like experts within the way our cognitive system works, but there are like two main important things we have to bear in mind when internalizing and absorbing the way a different system works, you know, like the language system works. On the one hand, and we leave behind everything which has to do with learning, you know, grammar. But on the one hand, translating might be the most easygoing way of making sure that we utter and we are productive.
Yeah.
We have a production, an oral production, or a written production, mostly an oral production in English, like from Spanish to English, let's say. So translations kind of come automatically.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it seems like just the most logical thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? Oh, this word is this in your native language. Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna translate it.
Yeah.
Right? Or how do you say whatever? How do you say we're gonna play a bit later, but how do you say llueve in English? So you might just directly go to your system here and say, okay, so in Spanish it's llueve. Most likely in English we have no subject, which is wrong. You do have a subject, okay? And you kind of translate it. Most likely you might translate it wrong, like rain.
Exactly.
So we have to be careful because translation, in order to do that process accurately, not to make mistakes, you should be really aware of the differences, because mind you, should the languages be the same, we wouldn't have problems learning them, but they are not the same, or at least some of them are more similar, but others are pretty like far distance from your mother tongue. So when it comes to translation, you have to be really mindful of how to translate. Or you can have a guide, like a teacher or someone else who could help you and tell you, llueve is not rain, is not it is rain, is actually it rains. And by working with this kind of exercises, like for instance, you're given a list of sentences in your mother tongue, which you have to translate later into English, might enable you, firstly, to be a bit more careful, because you might have seen from the first one, let's say that the first one is the sole phrase llueve and you translate it wrong. Now, if you see that the correct translation is it rains, the following sentences you have on the list, you might go a bit more careful with
Exactly. You're gonna at least deduct that the next ones are not going to be as easy, or you might have something that might be under their sleeves in these cases. Yeah.
Indeed. And I believe, but even though you have to be careful because not everything is valid from your mother tongue to English, I'm a strong believer that by doing this kind of techniques, by translating from your mother tongue to the other language you are learning, might help you to easily internalize like the use of that second language is like.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. So that's like one of the bedrocks, if you like, repetition, and I believe both of us agree on that.
Yes, certainly, completely.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, there is something there's a little caveat, as people like to say here, that repetition is key. Nevertheless, to my mind, it should always be spaced. Since, especially with words, when you are learning something new, you have to like try one at once and then perhaps like 3 hours later or maybe in the next day. So it becomes easier, and it becomes easier to remember as well. In case of words, then you have this fancy word that is, or this fancy expression that is semantic satiation, which is when you like listen to a word several times and you kind of like sounds weird to you. So in order to avoid this from happening, it's better to make sure that you're going to space your repetitions.
Indeed, because that how do you call it? That internalization have to be smooth, okay, not too mechanic.
Yeah.
So the smoother, the easier it is for your brain to capture and to recruit those words, even those specific grammar rules, by making it a bit more entertaining and spacing them. And I believe that when you start doing translations like that, you can start with just a couple of words, like really short sentences. You have like specific sentences. Let's take like the first day, you have some sentences based on the word llueve or whatever. And you don't repeat that, but just a couple of days later, yet integrating other elements. For instance, already asking, llueve, or add something else, so you make those sentences a bit longer. Therefore, by having more clues within the context, by having a longer context, by having a longer sentences, your brain can piece together better those elements and therefore can integrate a bit more fluently.
Oh, but I really like what you're saying. Like, I think that people can come up with their own strategies when it comes to the organization. For instance, like you could just create your own categories when you're practicing. For instance, you might want to practice questions this time, or you might only want to practice this verb conjugation, or you might want to practice like this subject conjugation. Like in this case, like how does this subject uses many of the verbs and all that. So it's actually nice because eventually it will later on come up now naturally. Like you won't have to think how do you conjugate speak depending on the subject. Well, you have practiced it so many times with different subjects that it becomes seamless.
Indeed, because by recruiting this kind of different information, widens a bit your knowledge, but most importantly, makes that internalization automatic.
Yeah.
So you do need, because in the end, we don't learn words, but words within a context.
There you are.
So the more you repeat that word within a specific content, the more likely that is to be like really deep grasped in your brain. So it comes out naturally the next time you are gonna utter or you are gonna be speaking about that.
And do you have a specific strategy or organization when it comes to this?
Organization.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I have like a technique I'm gonna explain here. Yet you can make it your way. And then I'm gonna speak a bit about the organization. So the technique would be, for instance, when it comes to repetition, combined with translation. Firstly, is to be having, or to be given, most likely to be given, like, as I said before, a list of specific phrases. You start with short phrases. Then you're asked to translate that. You're given some seconds to translate it from your mother tongue to English. Once you have done the translation, you're gonna be given the correct version of that sentence. So you can check whether your initial translation matched with the correct one. Once you have given, no worries if it doesn't match. The most important thing is that once you have the correct version in English, you should be repeating it. So the correct version in English should be also given like orally, okay? Orally. We're gonna do something at the end of the video like that for you to play with it and to practice. But you're given like the sentence. Imagine you have the sentence llueve, and you say in Spanish, from Spanish to English, you say it is rain. That's not correct. And then you are given the English correction, which is it rains. Now you will have to repeat what you've actually heard. You know, like it rains. It rains, making sure that you work on your fluency and on your accuracy by trying to say exactly the same, with the same pronunciation, intonation, and needless to say, the same words.
Yeah.
And it will be really cool either to have someone to hear you or to listen to you so that they can give you feedback right after, or if there's no one you can practice this with, to record yourself.
Yeah.
Because feedback lies at the heart of a good learning process.
There you are. Exactly.
Okay, so you do that. You do that like, I don't know, for 10 to 15 minutes a day. You can do it single-handedly if you already have the list of expressions, or as we will do it in our, or we have already done in our YouTube channel, you have material to work with. So single-handedly or with someone else. Now you can start with short phrases, and eventually, you know, like a couple of days later, you have them within a different context and longer, and you can phase in new words, and you can phase in different use of English or syntax. You know, like you say, you use the verb llover within a second conditional.
Yeah. Is this like I don't know if this is a conspiracy theory from me, but are you trying to make everybody end up writing a journal?
Well, I believe, I think it's not a conspiracy theory. You're completely right. You're dead right. A journal is paramount when it comes to keeping track of your process. Yeah.
So yeah, this is a great way to apply all these things that Rox is mentioning. You can just have a journal that has like, I drank water, and then yesterday I drank water that was cold, and then you keep making it like more and more complicated.
Yeah, so, like I'm dead after drinking water which was in a bad state, and I
exactly. Well, yeah, and then you can like send that to the company and perhaps getting a compensation for that.
Yeah, you can end up making like a complaint letter by using it. So
exactly. So yeah, this is a really effective way to make it a little more progressive. And yeah, again, this also applies to the spaced repetition. If you're like writing a diary, then it's only going to be once per day.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Now, you were telling me at the beginning that you were telling as well in the podcast that there are like two ways, you know, so it's a twofold process of internalizing. One of them is by translating.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there are many more than two ways, but we're going to be focused on these two. And the other one is repetition or something a bit on that end. So what?
Okay, so I want to focus a little bit on the aspect that sometimes when we have like a really strong foundation of like vocabulary and grammar rules and all that jazz, then we are still struggling when it comes to producing due to the fact that, especially with speaking, before we actually pronounce a word, we're translating everything in our heads. Okay, this is completely fine and this is completely natural when you are like in this process of like getting used to the language. However, even though this tends to happen that people can have like a really fluent level when they are reading, when they are listening, as well as when they are writing. However, when it comes to speaking, then they tend to stumble a little more often, or they tend to take long, or even after 2 minutes of speaking, they'll be like, I'm tired. And this is normal because you are spending more time translating in your head. Likewise, you are even doing an extra effort by translating in your head. On the other hand, this also might be a little bit counterproducing because if you, in some cases, you don't have the strong foundation, which can happen, you might end up translating it wrong, as you're mentioning. Like you might like say, oh, llueve, well, in English is rain, right? So yeah, something like that. Even in a higher level, not just in simple sentences or simple phrases like this one. So there is like a thing that I highly recommend that you start doing right now in order to make it stop just translating in your head, is to think about more about the actions, about the nouns and everything more visually, okay?
Okay, it's like picturing up in your brain.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know, like just speaking. What is speaking? It's not hablar, no, it's what I'm doing right now, okay? It's what we're doing right now. So just like think about it in your head, okay? For instance, I don't know, like tying your shoes. What is tying your shoes? It's not like atar las agujetas, no. It's when imagine yourself like doing the action and all these things, and by doing this more repeatedly, as well with spaced repetition, then eventually it's going to become more natural for you to just say, oh, that's tying your shoes. I'm not thinking about this in another language.
You're basically saying that we need to associate the picture we have in our brain to that action,
yeah,
or that
to the action, to the word, to whatever you are coming up
but
with.
somehow those words have to come up from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So where do they come from? I mean, there must be like something in our brain.
Yeah. I mean, this is where you can have guidance from a teacher or somebody else. Like when you're in high levels, you tend to recommend using monolingual dictionaries rather than the bilingual dictionaries. Why is that? Because they are able to make the associations already because of the vocabulary that they already have. Of course, this works in all the different levels. Like if you're in a really low level, then you can just simply think ball instead of thinking pelota. No, you think about a ball and that's it.
Yeah, definitely. And I believe another thing that can really help this specific dimension you're using, because for me it's like a dimension, would be to somehow have either if you do it single-handedly or if there's someone else helping you, those people helping you, or if you're the one doing it, would be to try to figure out why those words are called like that, why they're meaning. So the etymology. Etymology. Yeah, that's really important, because if you find like really interesting, if you find something like interesting, where does it come from? You know, like you have a specific word, it's like, where does it come from? Or so weird. Okay, so at least in my case, but perhaps because I tend to have this curiosity towards the meaning of the words, by understanding the meaning, you can retain that specific concept in your brain for longer. So perhaps, I don't know if you have a higher level by yourself, not just a monolingual dictionary, but an etymology dictionary, which tells you like the origin of it. So you can easily, like associate.
Yeah.
So you just link the dots. Oh, right.
Yeah, and especially if you're learning English, English is pretty much a Frankenstein of different languages. So you're always going to have a surprise every time you're looking for the origin of a word. So yeah, that's actually a great strategy as well.
Sorry, I just want to make a short break here. This is really fun because when you were talking about this other process of picturing the action or the concept in your brain. It took me back on a time that I read an article on the fact that our brain has up to 11 dimensions.
What?
Yeah, I swear to God. So that was like, because I kept, like when I saw Interstellar, the movie, right? It has like more dimensions, and it blew my mind because it's difficult to actually, like grasp the fact that there are so many dimensions. Yet, apparently, our brain is capable of somehow associating and creating whatever it creates, like knowledge and perception, throughout 11 dimensions.
Wow.
And I believe this is not like the first dimension. Translations might be the first dimension, but this might be like, I don't know, a second, third of a fourth dimension.
Yeah, and this, I don't know, this is taking me a little bit to Avatar, and like everybody's connected to like, I don't know, like a kind of a branch tree.
No, but for instance, haven't you experienced like the more you're exposed to the language, the more likely you are that you utter words you didn't even know you had in your deposit back there in your brain.
Exactly.
It can be either in your mother tongue or in the second or third language or whatever you're speaking, because just by being exposed or somehow worked on specific, skills, it comes naturally, and you think, how does it happen? Because everything is like intertwined. And
interesting. I do want to like do more research about that, because sounds really interesting. Yeah. Which takes me to another thing, that is I know that you know this guy, Stephen Krashen.
yeah.
So he has this theory of the affective filter theory, okay? That you need to make your environment less stressful, and then you can take it like the opposite way. And if you make it more friendly or more relaxing, then you are going to just make it easier for you to make it like these words be in your bank of your head and all that. To my mind, this is a really interesting concept due to the fact that mostly like these also can be sorry, I've lost my train of thought for a second. Okay.
Yeah, so, no, I got it.
Yeah. So I mean, like when you're like using feelings, you cannot like have a visual feeling, but you can think about the feeling. Okay. And that makes it easier for you to eventually like learn what the feeling means, and also associate it with other things. Like for instance, in some cases when you are playing, for instance, many people love playing football. Well, what does that mean to you? Well, that means like kind of like somehow happiness. And then you can like eventually like think about all the vocabulary that revolves around football. Like, I don't know, like running, like kicking and all that jazz, to just the idea of happiness. And it makes it even easier because it's something that you also enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's also part of it.
You make a really interesting point, something I haven't, of course I've heard about, and because in our classes we do speak about Krashen, yet this is something I haven't actually delved into so far. I do have to admit, because, okay, we are teachers, we love our job. And I believe one of the things that keeps happening in my case whenever I learn something new is that I encounter, or I find myself that I have this kind of sense of worship towards certain words in English, right? It's like, or in Spanish, like just a minute before we started the podcast, I was talking to Alonso and telling him, it's like, the word disyuntiva in Spanish sounds so cool. So I have this kind of respect and admiration towards the word which sounds like that, which, by the way, in Spanish is a quandary, which sounds great, but not that cool. So what happens is, like, when you have this kind of admiration towards a word, that's more likely to stick in your brain.
Exactly. Yeah, and if also they fit your personality in other cases. For instance, I love the word frugal. I like being frugal, and I think about that word. Like, that was one of the easiest words that I learned, like austero. I was like, wow, that was so simple. Yeah, I like that word. So yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there are some words which stick to you because somehow they strike a chord with you. There is a feeling
you
born
simply resonate
somewhere
with them. Exactly.
Yeah, so that's cool. In the end, this is a bit more like holistic, but if you think of it, the more open attitude you have towards a language, the more likely you are to grasp it and to integrate that within your system.
Yeah, which is also part of this guy's the affective filter.
Yeah.
Which is like pretty much if you're stressed, if you're not enjoying yourself, then probably like acquiring a language is not going to be as easy as it should.
Yeah, definitely. And this is, perhaps I will stray a bit away from this, but I would like to go along the same lines. This is something which I find pretty interesting, is the idea that when is it better to learn grammar? Because I guess you agree with me. Most of the Tom, Dick, and Harry, most of the people who come and learn English with us in Spain, because we're in Madrid, they have firstly been exposed to grammar. And later they had, in their classes, they were taught more about vocabulary, doing some readings, listening, and so on and so forth. And on the one hand, that was okay if you think of it, because, it's like you have grammar in English, you compare it to the grammar in your mother tongue, and you associate. Now, many people create a reluctance toward English because the first approach they had with the language was the grammar rules, the whole list of irregular verbs, the whole rules for conditionals, all the tenses. What happens, you have to you carry on like with you a baggage of grammar rules which you most likely know by heart, but when it comes to putting them into practice, you're lost because you haven't been contextualizing those things within a realistic, like a practical environment. So my question over here is, for us and for a new learner to be enjoying the language, should grammar be taught first, or should the learners of a new language like English dive into grammar once they have acquired and recruited more words into their repertoire?
Yeah, no, they firstly have to go with vocabulary. I mean, not only are you going to learn if you're translating what these words mean, but you're also eventually going to understand what these words are used for. Okay? Like, for instance, I don't know, like running. You're going to have that in a sentence. And if you understand the sentence just because of the word running, then the grammatical function of it is not going to be that complicated. And eventually you can just play with it. Like, oh, running cannot be used with this kind of sentences. Like, in the water, I cannot say I'm running, right? So, yeah. So I believe that first you have to have a repertoire of vocabulary before you are diving into all the rest of the grammar lessons.
Yeah. And a way of doing it would be the traditional, because it sounds like so
old-fashioned,
old-fashioned, over the hill, traditional. We don't like the word traditional anymore. Yet, reading and listening, making reading like really catching, and listening as well, is the first step. You start reading in English. You're 7-year-old and you're given a book or whatever, like not that difficult level, and you start reading. So by being constantly exposed to that, perhaps after a while, you can be introduced the rules. But the rules will be just for you. By the way, the reason why this works like that is because of these rules.
Exactly.
But the rules are just like an exception to the rule.
That sounds like the pirate code.
Because the rule would be to be previously exposed, so you have enough. You have enough input, so you can and clues on how to later clearly understand why they were like that. Like understand the grammar rules, which you will be later being provided with.
Yeah, this is especially useful when you're learning English, that English is a language that there are many exceptions to any rule. So that's also kind of like the pirate code. There's like a guide, but not necessarily like rules.
Yeah.
In Spanish, you might want to take a look at the instruction manual more often, because there are fewer exceptions. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and this is just a bit different. How do you respond to those students who, especially at the beginning, they ask you, why is it like that?
Interesting.
Yeah, I came across that ever since I started being an educator. It's like, imagine you explain to them. So we are in Spain. In Spain, we know the word tardar. Tardo 5 minutos en llegar ahí. So in English, you don't have such a word like tardar. You have the word it takes, which doesn't start with I take. It starts with it takes. So it takes me 5 minutes to go there. And then, like, immediately once you have explained that, the questions which triggers back is backfires from just explaining that is, but why is it like that?
Well, in this case, because you, like in English, you always need a subject.
You do need a subject, but sometimes it's like that because
that's the way it is.
That's the way it is.
Especially
There's
with
no
pronunciation.
specific. Okay, if we were like linguists and have like a deep knowledge, perhaps we might come with an like a real based reason why that is like that. Yet for like a general teacher of English, why is it like that? Well, because it's like that. You don't have to compare it to your mother tongue. The reason why you compare that system to your mother tongue is because you were taught the grammar first. So you're used to thinking of grammar.
Yeah.
You're used to encountering reasons by and understanding grammar. And sometimes there's just accepting.
And you can always blame English because it's a Frankenstein language. All of these like nuances when it comes to the pronunciation. Yeah, you can always find a reason, like a linguistic reason that takes it back to the origins of the language when it was a Norse language and then it became Germanic and all that.
And there things are different just because they were born in a different place and they had a different trajectory and progress. Take for instance, in the Pole North, in the North Pole, they have like, I don't know, 7 shades of white color, of the color white.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, it doesn't make any sense for us, hardly, because we hardly have any snow, yet when we do have it, it's just white.
Exactly.
So why is it like that? Well, because it's like that, because it's there. So we can explain that to you, but when it comes to practice and you go to the North Pole, you should be using, you have to, you want to be a connoisseur. You already use those 7 different names for 7 different shades of color. So,
yeah, I don't know which was the language. I forgot which was the language that they don't have pink. They have pale red.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, so it works both ways. Exactly.
I my career is translation. So I studied translation and interpreting. And I remember people for years asking me, "Oh, you're an actress?" No. I translate, but orally. And when we were studying at university, we were analyzing different theories. Like which the best translation is. How should we translate the best? There is an ethical code there and everything. So there was, I don't remember the author, but you guys, the ones who know, might just write it on the comments. But there was this guy, because we studied like 5 different guys who had like 5 different theories on how to better translate. And there was this guy he was a translator, and he translated the Bible for the Eskimos.
What?
Yeah, but when he translated the Bible, that was like some decades ago, he didn't use the lamb as the symbol of the religion, because they wouldn't have... Of course,
they wouldn't understand what this is.
Yeah, they may know what an elk is, but not a lamb. So he used a seal. He used the seal. And he was like, okay, to what extent is that, accurate? Well, it's not accurate to the traditional one yet. If you want to adapt that to a specific culture,
Yeah, but their culture really understand it's kind of like the same meaning in their culturally speaking.
and we were at that dilemma. We were posed that quandary: should we translate it or not? And we had like separate views there.
I guess that's where the asterisk takes place. And Christian religion is actually a lamb, not
Yeah.
There you are. Okay, interesting. Wow.
So
wow.
yeah, we kind of like stray away from the.
Yeah, so as we promised, so we have a little exercise here.
Yeah.
So go on.
Okay, so first, the instructions. You're going to be given several sentences in order, okay, in Spanish. We would like you to take a look at them and try to translate that in English. Just out loud, okay? You say it to yourself. Then, after a couple of seconds or after some seconds, you're going to be having the translation, the correct translation in English, like written, and also the way that sentence is said. Okay, so you're going to be having like a vocal of that sentence. Once you hear that vocal, try to repeat it a couple of times. Okay, that way you make sure that you become fluent with that sentence. Okay, so that's going to be the exercise.
There you are. Okay, so ready?
Llueve.
It rains. It rains. It rains.
Tardo 4 minutos en llegar.
It takes me 4 minutes to come. It takes me 4 minutes to come. It takes me 4 minutes to come.
Soy profesora desde hace 10 años.
I've been a teacher for 10 years. I've been a teacher for 10 years. I've been a teacher for 10 years.
Déjalo en paz.
Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Leave it alone.
Me cuesta ver sin gafas.
I find it hard to see without glasses. I find it hard to see without glasses. I find it hard to see without glasses.
So, how was it?
Yeah, and my question is, how many translation you had right at first out of those you were given? And the other question is, which of those phrases you encounter more difficult to repeat, like out loud with the correct pronunciation and intonation?
You are.
Yeah, just you can answer in the comments so we can see a bit how your performance was.
Okay. So I think that will cover us for today, right?
Yeah, definitely. Guys, this is not just it, okay? We would like to kindly invite you to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, because you will encounter many more videos of this kind of practice, okay? Like, I don't know, expressions to learn on a daily basis, or how to become fluent with these expressions. So you will have nice videos on our YouTube channel to practice with, and therefore to integrate and internalize.
Yeah, exactly. Let us know your preferences so we can interact with you more often and just implement these ideas in our new videos and podcasts. Yeah. So yeah, see you later.
Bye.
See you next one. Bye.